Draymond Green has signed a 4-year extension to stay a Golden State Warrior. 4-year, $100 million deal. And thank you to Rots on the 650 on the Comcast Business text line, helping us with the breakdown of the contract. It's $22.2 million in year one. It's an 8% raise after that. So when you get to the fourth year, I believe it's about what he said no to this year.
Exactly.
JD.
He gets his 27.6 back, but he gets it back in the fourth year, and the Warriors are able to save as they go through it. So I think that was the common sense and the common ground. Warriors save a bunch of actual cash up front. Draymond gets it back at the end, including the ability to say, which I think sounds pretty important. It was important for Draymond to have it announced at 3:00 that he was a $100 million contract player.
Right.
And so he found a way to be able to do that. Whether he ends up getting 100, we'll see. But I think I think this is a good deal. I think this is an everybody wins deal. It's a far cry from what we were talking about yesterday.
Woo.
Could it be
3 and 100?
3 and 100? Could it be even 3 and 90? I think would have been a gulp and a raise over. Think about that in terms of, Anthony Slater had the $43 million in actual savings just on paying Draymond $5 million less, roughly, this coming season. Think if that number had been $3 million more as opposed to $5 million less. I mean, that would have cost the Warriors another $25 million in actual cash.
No
now
doubt.
they're minus 40 over the. And again, that money, some have said. And I get it. Well, why do you care? That's Joe Lacob's money. Why would a fan care about that? But that's money and savings that Joe Lacob has shown he will redistribute. It doesn't mean they've got that money to go spend on a $40 million player, but that money is going to allow down the line to be spent in some form or fashion.
It turns out to be 3 years and about $72 million for Draymond Green, with a player option for year 4 at about 27.6. As we mentioned earlier, so pay the under on $90 million over 3 years. I had set it at 89.9, a 3-year deal at about $90 million. Turns out the first 3 years of this deal are way less, and if Draymond wants to get the biggest piece of this contract, he's got to come back for year 4, which as of now, if you look at the Warriors under contract in that year 4, nobody's under. No, Andrew
Just
Wiggins.
him.
Wiggins has a player opt at 30.1 for 2026-27.
So if he's an unproductive player, he'll be taking that option. If he's a productive player, he won't be.
Well, unless the league revenues go way down, but Andrew Wiggins would project out to being worth way more.
I always look at those player options as I try to put the player options very bluntly, right? Basically a player option is if the player is somebody you want to keep, he's opting out. If he's somebody you don't want to keep, he's opting in. Like, that's the common sense component to it.
Other news, Shams Charania reporting that Jeremy Grant has agreed to a 5-year, $160 million deal to return to the Portland Trailblazers. Wow. So
they keep doing it wrong.
Well, I mean, what do you do if you're Portland? You're chasing it now. I mean, you're totally in on Damian Lillard, and so now you got to do whatever you can to surround him with as much as you possibly can.
I don't get it. I just don't get it. I mean, and I don't think that they're necessarily that far away from being able to figure it out. I view the Jeremy Grant deal, not to get too lost in the weeds on it, almost as it's a
desperation sensation.
Well, it's just it's also a make the move. It's a make the move to potentially trade him down the line. Although that's a tough contract potentially to trade down the line for the type of player he is. I mean, does he? I don't know. They have their own 2-timeline thing going. They've got Dame, who they want to keep, and I guess he wants to be there. They've got Jeremy Grant. They've got Shadon Sharp and now Scoot Henderson, who are, to me, that would be the building blocks of a hell of a backcourt moving forward. And so to me, like, I would have torn it down to the studs and built around Scoot and built around Shadon Sharp. And we're going to take our lump, but they
not
don't
quite ready to do that just yet.
Trade Dame for pieces that fit around those other young players. Maybe you keep Jeremy Grant at that point and then figure it out. So he's kind of a player that fits in both timelines of it. But I just don't see how they can shortcut their way into being a contender again. So
888-957-9570. The news is out. Draymond Green has re-signed 4 years and $100 million. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Willard and Dibs on the Odyssey app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Before we go to the phones, JD, do you see another bit of news that is worth breaking here, or can we go to the phones here? I know that Aroldis Chapman has been traded from Kansas City as we cross-pollinate. Aroldis Chapman, a baseball trade has gone down.
Couple small moves, Javon Carter agreement with the Bulls, and Chimezi Metu, who had been a backup big for the Kings, is going to Phoenix. Phoenix, very active. That's a stretch five type of a player, can shoot the three ball a little bit.
JD is all over the wire. He'll keep us updated on all the free agent signings, but now we go to the phones. L in Pacifica wants to talk about the Draymond deal. What's going on, L? You're on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, busy show. You guys are doing a great job. I think I'm glad to hear that Draymond is back with the Warriors. Just had a couple questions for you guys. As far as like previous NBA players, who does Draymond really remind you of? And looking at the 4-year deal with Draymond, given the inability to score, I know he can play defense, but he's getting up there in age. How can Draymond stay relevant in the next 3 years and help the Warriors, capture another championship? Because I think if you can't score and you're getting older, you're going to be a little bit less as far as the defensive end. So Ron Artest is my comparison, but what do you guys think?
Thank you, Al. It's an interesting comp. Ron Artest was able to change his game in different ways. He became a little bit more of a scorer than he was, compared to Draymond Green. I don't think Draymond's evolution can be into what suddenly he's going to now be able to shoot the ball again.
No, the one thing I will say about Draymond, I do think he projects to be a useful player as he gets older. It might be a useful player in less minutes. Like I just feel like passing and basketball IQ play like that. Like you can almost play with anybody in that respect, especially if you add shooting. And so he may not be part of a big three per se, and maybe the back 2 years of the 4-year deal, but he still would be a capable rotation player at that point. It's not like he goes from defensive player of the year, which I think he's beneath that level right now.
He's second team though. He's top 10 all defense.
Yeah, so he's trickling down a little bit. Yeah. So maybe you get 2 more years of that level of play, and then he still becomes just a guy that's a really useful chess piece. And maybe you're going to need somebody better to be in front of him at some point toward the end of the deal. But that doesn't mean that you have to start thinking about, I think, the next phase for really Draymond, and even potentially Klay, as far as like what's it going to look like.
34 in March. So you're talking about 34, 35, 36, and 37-year-old Draymond in the spring of every season.
And this isn't an exact comparison in terms of style of play or type of players. I don't think there's really ever been anybody like Draymond. But I think of it in terms of the Spurs model, in that Tim Duncan wasn't Tim Duncan for a bunch of years at the end with San Antonio. He was still a good, useful player. Tony Parker wasn't Tony Parker, but he was still a useful player on championship team. Ginobili was the same thing. He became less useful as he got older. Now, where it breaks off is they had Kawhi, and Kawhi became a legitimate number one superstar in that last title. But what I'm getting at is the other 3 were still good players, even though they weren't the players that they had been throughout the course of their career. Now, you may need to have that Kawhi role if you're still going to be a contender at the back end of this deal. I'm not saying the Warriors have that or will get that, but it's more along the lines of the comparison of the older guys can still be useful even as they decline.
Right. If you can get a Kawhi Leonard,
it's not all
into
or nothing.
The mix.
Well, no, but I'm just saying useful players. Like you can be
Tim
a
Duncan
useful
was
player.
16-9 in that final year that they won the title as a 37-year-old. So you're asking Draymond Green at 37. Now, Draymond's never going to be 16-9, but can Draymond be 8, the kind of player, the triple
in
single
25
player.
minutes, in 25 minutes as
Exactly.
opposed to 36.
Or can he be 6, 8, and 8 because he's become a better passer? His scoring is going down, but can he still be that useful veteran on a championship team? And I think the Spurs comp is interesting because, Ginobili and Parker that last title year were also in their 30s.
Yeah.
And you had young Kawhi Leonard on the scene who was able to carry you. 888-957-9570. That's the phone line. It's also the Comcast business text line. This one from the 510. In year 4, Draymond can opt in and be the head coach, which I thought was a pretty funny way to look at Draymond's future. Let's go to Bill in San Francisco. He's excited. Bill, he's back. What's going on?
Hey, long time listener, first time caller. Love you guys, everyone on there. I'm just happy that they signed Draymond. I love Draymond. I love Klay. I love Steph. Obviously, huge Warriors fan. And I just don't. I couldn't imagine Draymond going anywhere else, Portland, wherever. I still think he would really fit anywhere else, and just that he's going to be finishing out with Klay and hopefully Klay and Steph. Like, that makes me happy. I've done a lot of games, and I like seeing them play together. And, maybe he can slap some sense into Chris Paul when he gets into the locker room. Who knows?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. It's going to be an interesting mix, I think, with Chris Paul and Draymond Green. Based on what we've heard from, Ryan Russillo, who joined us a couple of days ago, who knows Chris Paul pretty well, it doesn't seem like the egos will clash too much, JD, but we know this: when things go a little awry, when a team goes through a losing skid, or there might be a couple of possessions that don't go the way they normally go, that's when the veterans will be tested in terms of who has the biggest ego in the room.
It will. I'm just not concerned about that among the stars. Among the Steph, Klay, Draymond, Chris Paul. Like, I think they're all intelligent enough to put that stuff aside and understand that they're. To me, where it could become problematic is how do they handle the young players, and we've already seen, and we've talked about it a ton on this station, the fact that part of the story surrounding the young players and why maybe they aren't farther along and a couple are now gone has been the way that the veteran players handled them. Like, in fairness, they have not carried the torch down the line in a fashion that you would think is on par with Warriors culture, basically. And so to me, it's more about, do they become their own four-man unit plus maybe Looney and Wiggins against the rest of the team? I would be more worried about that,
right,
than
CP3
and Draymond,
yeah.
or Klay rolling his eyes at CP3 and that kind of thing.
Draymond's back. He's going to sign 4 years, $100 million, with the fourth year a player option. We want your thoughts. 888-957-9570. Draymond's back. What do you think? Another piece of news coming out, JD. The Cleveland Cavaliers are signing Max Strus to a 4-year, $64 million deal. So
wait, say that again for Strus?
4 and 64 for Strus.
Wow.
This according to Evan Massey.
Good for him.
So Strus goes from the Eastern Conference winners to Cleveland. He gets 4 and 64. So Strus is going to be a Cavalier.
Good for him. I think he made the most of his playoff run.
Exactly.
I'll put it that way on him. I don't think he's. I think he made the most of his playoff run. I don't want to say something too disparaging of him.
Well, the fact that Tyler Hero was out for the entire playoffs gave him the opportunity to come in and perform as well as he did.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think Cleveland's got enough talent to where that he can probably come in and help them. And
I think Cleveland becomes an interesting team in the East. They're loading up a little bit.
Yeah, they're trying to, for sure. I didn't take them seriously as far as being contenders last year. I thought they were a really good team. I wasn't surprised to see them get beat in the first round the way that they did. But yeah, they're trying to make sure they can at least get out of the first round in what is a pretty top-heavy Eastern Conference.
You guys are talking Cavs, and it's about the shooting that they need. They just signed another shooter. George Niang, former Philadelphia 76er, just signed a 3-year, $26 million deal to go there as well.
Thank you, Lucas. Well done.
Player.
And George was a guy that many in the vet min Warrior market were hoping for. And you said he got 3 and 26, Lucas? Is that the number? Yeah, so 3 and 26 is a little.
Okay.
It's a far cry away from the veteran minimum.
We've got some sounder. We got a sounder worthy news.
Well, give it to us, Mark Randy.
We got a sounder.
95.7 The Game breaking news.
Another one we talked about in the changeover when yours truly said the only team that Kyrie Irving needs to worry about is the Dallas Mavericks. Forget about this, trying to create a market. Well, Kyrie Irving now, multiple reports, he is agreeing to a 3-year, $126 million contract with the Dallas Mavericks. So he was the only team that could pay him and would be willing to pay him and wanted to pay him. And so Kyrie goes back to Dallas. That's why they traded for him. 3 and 126. May God have mercy on their souls.
Player option for that 3rd year, so he gets $42 million on average. And you go ahead and put Dallas out of your Western Conference picture for the next year.
They need to build around. I mean, look, they gave up their role. The few good role players that they had, they gave up to get Kyrie. They've got a 2-star system now.
Yeah.
And they got to figure out how to build the rest of the roster around those two.
I'm not sold on the 2 stars. I mean, Luka Doncic is unbelievable, but he hasn't taken that next step to where he's a guy who can carry you in the biggest moments.
It's contingent on Kyrie playing like a freaking star,
right,
65 to 75 times a year,
as opposed to 16 to 17 times a year.
As opposed to when he feels like it, or when he needs to take that PTO for that 42 large a year.
888-957-9570. Back to your phone calls. Mark wanted to weigh in and brag about how he got the deal right, but he dropped off. Mark, if you're still out there, call back. I'd love to give you a chance to gloat. But meantime, we're going to Vince in the city. What's going on, Vince? You got questions? JD has answers.
Hey, what's up, guys? So I know that with this Draymond re-signing, it saves the Warriors a bunch of money. I believe it keeps them out of the repeater tax. But my question is, how much money will be left over before
How much money will be left, Vince? Is that what you're asking?
Jerome and Lester? Yes. Because there's qualifying offers to Lester Quinones and Ty Jerome. I'm wondering if there's still going to be enough for Dario Saric, like you guys are asking or saying, and possibly for Brook Lopez.
Thank you, Vince. I
there's
appreciate
no
it.
money for Brook Lopez.
No, he's not a veteran minimum guy, but Dario Saric, as we now know is the correct pronunciation, is he's a guy who might be there. He might be there in the veteran minimum. And Monty Poole of NBC Sports Bay Area has already reported that the two sides are reportedly close on a deal. We'll keep an eye on that if that gets finalized. But Brook Lopez he's probably closer to a mid-level guy, which is $12 million, not $3 million.
Yeah, and look, the Warriors can sign as many minimum players as they want, as long as they're willing to pay the tax, and that's just a Joe Lacob out-of-pocket decision. Money spent out of pocket. They can sign as many veteran minimum players as they want. So it's not a matter of you're saving. It's not a matter of the $40 million in actual cash saved is $40 million to spend in a pool on a bunch of different players. Like that's not how it works. Warriors have no cap space. So they cannot sign anybody that is beyond a veteran minimum player. And Brook Lopez projects to probably be, I would think Brook Lopez is probably more like a $15 million
right, even ahead of the mid-level,
Yeah, mid-level is probably what he would take as the offers are drying up. I guess I'll sign somewhere with a mid-level.
And I think Lester Quinones was more in the range of a two-way deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Possibly. Yeah, no doubt. And the veteran minimum number, by the way, is different
based on years of
service.
Exactly.
And so, a Quinones minimum or a Ty Jerome minimum is less than an Otto Porter minimum. Don't necessarily need the sounder on this one.
I like how you make these judgments on the fly. Like Kyrie Irving,
I do think
it's breaking. That's sounder worthy.
Yeah, and Damian Lee, I kid. Damian Lee was.
I thought you misused the sounder a little bit. I don't want to cheapen the sounder with comedy, but I allowed it once
on Damian Lee.
Yeah,
no, I
thought you were running material, but I was going to allow it.
I was because I know Warrior fans love Damian Lee.
We all do, absolutely.
All-time favorite.
But you got more for us, JD. You got more news, but this is not sounder worthy.
I don't believe this is sounder worthy. I think Lucas may disagree with me just based on the
Is he a USC guy?
I do disagree.
No, it's just a name that had been linked to the Warriors that is getting a deal. It's Joe Ingles.
Okay. He's a big Ingles guy back there.
And the Orlando Magic have agreed to a deal. So it sounds like Joe Ingles is going to get more than the minimum.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the players that I think the Warriors were hoping, maybe nobody signs him and he has to take minimums, and then they could make a play among a group of teams that would obviously want him at the league minimum, but he's going to Orlando.
And this is kind of like being the pet at the pet store, where you see all these different pet owners come in and they're picking which pet that they want to adopt, and you're sitting there and you're just hoping and you're hoping and you're hoping. And the Warriors are in a spot where they got to wait until the very end of this, JD, because any of these players who can get more than the minimum are going to get more than the minimum. And the Warriors, it's known that the only players they can get are guys who have no other option, basically. So for Warriors fans, you're going to have to sit and wait.
Yeah, let's hit the sounder. We got a trio of news to update you on here.
It's
but
breaking.
Yeah, this is all sounder worthy, I think.
95.7 The Game breaking news.
Threefold and some big names here. Chris Middleton is going back to Milwaukee. A 3-year, $102 million deal. He turned down a $41 million option, so he ends up getting $102 million over 3 years to stay in Milwaukee. I know there was some thought that maybe the Kings were going to be interested in him. That clearly had dried up when they decided to bring Harrison Barnes back yesterday. And Jakob Poeltl has agreed to a 4-year, $80 million contract to remain with Toronto. Poeltl, somebody that had been linked to the Warriors as a potential trade candidate at the deadline. And Cam Johnson went in the Kevin Durant trade from Phoenix to Brooklyn, and he's staying in Brooklyn. 4 years, $108 million for Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson getting the bag.
Pay him.
He's a major bag alert for Cam Johnson.
Yeah.
There. I like Cam Johnson. That's a lot of freaking money for Cam Johnson.
Good trio right there. John Dickinson's in for Mark Willard, and he is crushing it right now with breaking news. More free agent signings coming up. Free agency now 54 minutes old. Let's get the phone call. One more phone call in, JD, before
All of those
we
via
dip.
Woj, by the way. Just
Appreciate it. You got to give all the Woj bombs. It's like 4th of July with all the explosions.
Yeah,
in
Woj
the air
just came
from
in.
Woj.
Woj just came in. Boom, boom, boom.
I got Woj up 11-6 on Shams right now with Chris Haynes pulling up in the bronze medal spot. Sum it up. He wants to talk about Draymond's new contract. What up, Sum?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I love the show. Thanks for taking the call. But I just wanted to shed some light on the fact that, Draymond negotiating that salary for that first year is in my opinion, a big thing in Dre's belief in the franchise and Mike Dunleavy. In a free agency where Jeremy Grant and Poeltl and all these players are getting big bags, Draymond could have, walked and gotten a big bag himself. But I think he wants to stick by Steph and by this franchise, and, the hometown discount is much appreciated, Dre.
Yeah, thank you. Sum it up. I appreciate it. And that, to me, is an interesting question, JD, because do other teams value Draymond at the level that the Warriors value Draymond? And we're seeing some of these major deals, this major bag alert coming for players that don't have the same credentials as Draymond Green. But if you're another team looking to sign somebody to a 9-figure deal, is Draymond Green really going to command the money that Cam Johnson, for example, got?
Clearly, the answer to that question is no. Given the way that this whole thing is played out. I agree with the caller and the take on Draymond doing this shows that he believes in what this franchise can do over these next few years. He believes that the money that he's helping them save, which he will get back on the back end, and he knows he can, even in that 4th year, he's buying in on what they can do to make themselves a championship contender, or the belief that they're closer than maybe you or I think they are currently to being a championship contender again. So I think there is some faith absolutely being shown, not only in the organization, but I think a lot of this is, and it's been the truth since May the 12th, a lot of this is the Steph, Klay, Draymond belief in Steph, Klay, and Draymond.
And also the comfortability of knowing you've played here your whole career, and Draymond did say at the end of the postseason this year that he wanted to ride out with the guys with whom he rode in to the league. And also, JD, Draymond had said previously that 15 years in the association would be his sweet spot, and he's played 11 years. So now this deal, it's a 4-year deal, 3 years with a player option. If Draymond wants to bow out after 15 years, well, he doesn't have to worry about another contract ever again. He signs a 4-year deal worth $100 million, about $22 million this year, and a player option in year 4. Draymond Green will remain a Golden State Warrior.